For months, we've analyzed the slow, grinding nature of this war, watching Russia's strategy of stretching Ukrainian forces thin across multiple fronts. They've been trying to find a weak point, a place where Ukraine's reserves are exhausted. But for 4 months now, that strategy has failed. The summer offensive yielded no major cities, no significant breakthroughs. It's a bitter reality for the Kremlin. They've paid a staggering price in blood and steel for barely any territorial gain. And this has created a crisis of legitimacy for Putin, a crisis of manpower for the Russian military, and a crisis of confidence in his war machine. With rising desertion rates, a dwindling pool of willing recruits, and an economy groaning under the weight of this conflict, Putin cannot afford to enter negotiations from a position of weakness. He needs a decisive victory. A victory that may not change the final outcome of the war, but one he can use to demand a peace on his own terms. A peace that includes handing over the Donbass. So, what do you do when your strategy of attrition fails? You go for a knockout blow. You go all in. You prepare for what Napoleon would have called a general battle, a major engagement designed to decide the outcome of the entire war. This is FPV Explainer, where we break down the most fascinating stories in drone warfare. If you're enjoying this deep dive, hit the like button, subscribe, and drop a comment telling us what topic you want to see next. Your feedback shapes our future videos and keeps us bringing you clear, detailed analysis from the front lines. The intelligence is clear. This isn't a feint. This is the largest redeployment of Russian forces we've seen since their retreat from northern Ukraine in 2022. The signs are unmistakable and converging on a single point: the Donbass. First, there's the sheer scale of the troop movement. We're seeing Russian airborne and marine units being pulled off other, less active fronts and funneled directly into the Donbass. According to open-source intelligence, the 40th and 155th Marine Brigades have been moved from the Sumy region, where their offensive has completely stalled. There are reports that the 177th Marine Regiment could soon follow. Donetsk is reportedly swarming with Marines. Their vehicles, like the bread vans and trucks, are showing military license plates from the Eastern Military District, confirming the presence of these Pacific Fleet brigades. It's not just the Marines. We're seeing elements of the 76th Guards Air Assault Division, also redeployed from the Sumy front. And even more surprisingly, the 70th Motor Rifle Division from the Kherson front, which has been holding the line along the Dnipro, is being transferred to Bakhmut. This is a monumental risk, exposing a previously stable part of their front. These units are not fully rested or restored. They are being thrown directly into the fire. This is FPV Explainer, where we break down the most fascinating stories in drone warfare. And the visual evidence is stunning. For the first time since 2022, we are seeing long columns of Russian military equipment being transported on military trailers. Tanks like the T-90M and T-72B, armored vehicles, and even earth movers. These aren't just a few units. This is a massive, coordinated effort to bring an unprecedented amount of armored capability to the Donbass. The second, and perhaps most damning indicator, is the sheer intensity of the aerial bombardment. An intelligence analyst specializing in satellite imagery reports that in just 3 weeks, from mid-August to early September, the Russian Air Force conducted 1,500 strikes with glide bombs in the Pokrovsk-Kostiantynivka sector alone. This is an unprecedented concentration of firepower. It represents 40% of all Russian airstrikes. Last time we saw this kind of concentrated aerial bombardment, it was a prelude to a failed Russian breakthrough. Now they are doing it again, and in the urban areas of Kostiantynivka, showing a complete disregard for the civilians who remain there. This isn't just harassment, this is a deliberate and brutal effort to soften the ground for a major assault. All the signs point to a simple truth. Russia has exhausted its options and is now gambling everything on one last great push to take the Donbass. It is a desperate move, but make no mistake, it is a formidable threat. Now that we understand the scale of this new Russian push, we have to look at the how. What are the tactics they're bringing to this battle? What we're seeing on the ground suggests a new, yet worryingly familiar approach. The Russian military is employing a two-pronged combined arms strategy that mixes infiltration with massive mechanized assaults. First, there's the infiltration tactic, especially around urban centers like Pokrovsk. This is a subtle, almost silent approach. They're using small, isolated groups, not the large assault units of the past, to try and bypass Ukrainian forward positions. The goal is to get deep into the city and establish positions, avoiding direct contact and the attention of Ukrainian drones and artillery. This is an adaptation to the reality of the front, where large, slow-moving groups are immediately identified and destroyed. It's a frustrating and dangerous tactic for Ukrainian defenders, forcing them to dedicate resources to rooting out small pockets of enemy fighters who have already bypassed the initial lines.
But the real story, and the most dangerous element of this offensive, is the second tactic, the massive mechanized assaults on the flanks. For months, we've seen a conspicuous absence of Russian armor on the front lines. We talked about how many analysts believed they were deliberately hoarding it, preserving their remaining tank and vehicle fleet. It appears they were waiting for this moment. We are now seeing columns of tanks, including the modern T-90M and T-72B, and other armored vehicles moving in force, a sight unseen since the early days of the war. They are betting that an overwhelming, concentrated armored push can simply break through Ukrainian defenses and achieve what months of human-wave infantry assaults could not. This raises a critical question. Is this a calculated risk or a sign of utter tactical incompetence? And to answer that, we have to look at who is leading this charge. The word from military analysts is that the newly arrived Russian units are under the command of Lieutenant General Sukhrav Akhmedov. This name should send a chill down the spine of anyone following this conflict. Akhmedov is a commander with a truly disastrous track record. He's the man who led the infamous failed attack on Vuhledar, where his 155th Marine Brigade was all but wiped out. He's notorious for his incompetence, for ordering his troops to form up in the open, where they were then obliterated by Ukrainian HIMARS strikes. The fact that he's back, in command of a major offensive, using the same tactics that have failed before, suggests a troubling pattern of repeating mistakes. However, it could also be a brutal calculation. The Russian command may have realized that their infantry-only attacks have failed. They are betting that even with a high probability of heavy losses, an overwhelming force of armor, even if led by a known incompetent, might just be enough to overload Ukraine's drone operators and artillery. They are taking a high-risk gamble, throwing a limited and precious resource, their remaining modern armor, at a desperate problem. But the reality on the ground is proving that this new tactic is already failing. Ukrainian defenders, especially their elite drone units, are perfectly adapted to dealing with this kind of threat. We've seen incredible footage from the 79th Airborne Brigade showing them destroying a Russian mechanized column deep behind enemy lines before it could even get to the front. Using long-range rockets and FPV drones, they systematically picked apart tanks and armored vehicles, proving that Russia's armor is no safer even 10 kilometers from the front. This is a direct test of wills, a test of Russia's belief in its overwhelming numbers versus Ukraine's mastery of reconnaissance and precision strikes. And right now, the numbers are not on Russia's side, and neither is the tactical advantage. Ukrainian drones are proving to be the perfect counter to Russia's last-ditch attempt at a mechanized breakthrough, making it clear that a new tactic is not enough to win when the fundamental rules of the war have already changed.
So we've established that Russia is all in on this new offensive. They've massed their forces and they're using a dangerous mix of tactics. But the key question remains, what is Ukraine's answer? What we're seeing is not simply a reaction. It is a meticulously planned, comprehensive defense that was built on foresight and an understanding of their enemy's intentions. The Ukrainian military command has been watching this buildup, and they are preparing a multi-layered defense designed to stop this offensive before it can even reach its full potential. The first layer is a massive structural reform of their ground forces. They are moving away from temporary ad hoc formations and embracing a core reform, where permanent army corps are being built around their most combat-hardened and effective brigades. For example, on the Pokrovsk front, you have the 7th Air Assault Corps and the 1st National Guard Corps Azov. This creates a far more stable and cohesive defense. These corps are not just infantry. They are being fortified with their own dedicated support units, engineer battalions, artillery regiments, and, most critically, their own drone regiments. This means that a unified command can now coordinate everything from digging trenches to hitting targets behind enemy lines, all within a single integrated structure. The second layer is a physical one, the fortification of the defense lines themselves. Based on satellite analysis, Ukrainian engineers and civilian construction companies are working tirelessly to reinforce what analysts are calling the new Donbass line. They are digging new anti-tank ditches and filling in gaps that were exploited in previous Russian offensives. This is a crucial lesson learned from the past. These new fortifications are specifically designed for the realities of modern drone warfare, with covered fighting positions and fortified bunkers instead of the open trenches of previous generations. While they can't build new lines right up to the front, they are ensuring that if the Russians do manage to break through, they will not be able to advance into the open.
But the most fascinating and decisive element of Ukraine's defense is the third layer, their preemptive strikes on Russia's deep rear. This is where the strategic genius truly lies. Ukraine isn't waiting for the enemy to reach their lines, they are going to the enemy. We saw a perfect example of this just last week. Ukrainian forces launched a combined missile and drone strike on multiple Russian command centers in Donetsk. They hit the former Topaz factory, which served as an army-level command post. They struck the Donetsk metallurgical plant, the command post for the 20th Motor Rifle Division. And they targeted the Institute of Automation, the command center for the 41st Combined Arms Army. This is a brilliant strategic move. A military command structure, even an incompetent one, is the brain of the operation. You don't have to destroy a whole army if you can decapitate its command and control. Without a central command, logistics, artillery support, and troop movements fall into chaos, making any large-scale offensive impossible. And this is where Ukraine's evolving drone technology plays a pivotal role. We are seeing the increased use of a new drone, the Ram-2X, which has been nicknamed the Ukrlancet. This isn't an FPV drone for close-range combat, or a long-range drone for deep strikes. This is a middle-strike weapon, designed to hit targets dozens of kilometers behind the front lines, precisely where the Russian forces are massing before their assault. We've seen footage of this drone taking out a tank on a flatbed trailer 45 kilometers from the front, in what was supposed to be a safe concentration area. This is a game changer. It means Ukraine can now destroy Russian armor and logistics before it even gets to the front line, turning a Russian planned offensive into a disorganized meat grinder before a single shot is fired on the forward positions. This multi-layered defense, structural reform, physical fortification, and deep strike preemption is a clear signal. Ukraine is not simply waiting for the Russian army to come to them. They are anticipating their every move and preparing to stop them with a level of coordination and technological superiority that will make this desperate Russian offensive a very short and very bloody one. In this video, we've dissected what could be the final, most decisive phase of the war's ground campaign. The evidence is overwhelming. Russia is committing to a last-ditch, all-in offensive, gambling its remaining elite units and a precious supply of armored vehicles on a single, massive push. They are betting on their numbers and their firepower to overwhelm a determined defense.
But they've made a fatal miscalculation. They are fighting an army that is no longer static or unprepared. Ukraine isn't just reacting, it's anticipating. The Ukrainian military has meticulously prepared its defenses, not just by digging trenches, but by building a new, more effective military structure. They have a structural advantage through their Korapor reform, which allows them to integrate every element of their defense, from engineers to drone operators. And they are fighting with a strategic foresight that is proving to be decisive. By striking deep at Russia's command posts and using advanced drones like the Ukra-Lancet to destroy armor and logistics before it can even reach the battlefield, Ukraine is already winning the war of maneuver. This isn't just a head-on clash, it's a test of an outdated military doctrine against a new, more adaptable one. The outcome of this offensive will not be decided by who has the most tanks, but by who has the better intelligence, the more effective drones, and the unbreakable will to fight. And based on all the evidence, Ukraine is ready to win this final battle.